Hello everyone. Today we will study Lady Lazarus. This is a poem by Sylvia Plath. Now, who is Lazarus in Lady Lazarus? Lazarus is a reference to a biblical character who's a person who had died, but Jesus had brought him back to life. So, in literature, the name Lazarus often refers to somebody who has come back from his own death. And Sylvia Plath here refers to herself as Lady Lazarus. In one of her recitations, she had also discussed this poem as that about a woman who has this terrible gift of being able to be reborn. And she says, and the only trouble is that she has to die first. And she also compares the person who is being described in this poem, Lady Lazarus, as a phoenix. So through this poem, Sylvia Plath talks about her own encounters with death and how she's come back to life. And to give a small biographical reference to this poem, she has written it towards 1962-63, where these are actually the last few months of her life, and this is a very creative time for her. She is taking care of her children while her husband had gone away and their marriage had fallen apart, and perhaps she is writing in a state of great frenzy, great frustration, great anger, and all of that comes into this poem, and she expresses her anger, her frustration in it. In this, she also talks about, since this is a confessional poem, the biographical evidence are important for us to understand this poem. She also refers to her suicide attempts that she had made. So in 1953, when she was just 20 years old, she had tried to commit suicide, and of course she was unsuccessful. And this is, she's written this poem very close to her death, and in 1963 she actually dies of suicide. So, and this poem is also read as her as a poem about suicide, and as her attempt with suicide, and as her encounters with death, as it were. So most of the stanzas talk about death, and often this poem is also read along with Daddy, and these two poems are in a way read together because they share some symbolism. Both these poems have symbolism of Nazi Germany. She talks about her oppressors as people from Germany, as people from the Nazi regime, and she talks of herself as a victim, and as a Jewish victim. And so in this poem also we see all these allusions, we see all these symbols. So let's start reading this poem. She says, I have done it again. 1 year in every 10 I manage it. A sort of walking miracle, my skin bright as a Nazi lampshade, my right foot a paperweight, my face a fearless fine Jew linen. Now what does she say here? She says, she here is referring to her encounters with death, and apparently when she was just 10 years old, she had had a swimming accident, or so many people say, or whatever accident it may have been. She had encountered death when she was just 10 years old. Of course, we don't know it in this stanza, but it becomes clear in the next few stanzas. And this is what she means. I do this every 10 years. And when she was 20 years old, again, she had an encounter with death. So maybe in these stanzas, she's talking about how she encounters death every 10 years. And ironically, at 30, she had also passed away. So that would make her attempt to die, or her encounters with death, an event that happens every decade. So she says, I have done it again. 1 year in every 10 I manage it. A sort of walking miracle, my skin bright as a Nazi lampshade, my right foot a paperweight. Now she refers to herself, her body, as a lampshade or as a paperweight, because there were, in Nazi Germany, there were certain rumors, and there may be some truth in these rumors, that the Jewish victims of the Nazi regime, their bodies were used to make lampshades or paperweights, etc. And so this is an allusion to the Nazi treatment of the Jews, to the items, to make them into items of utility. And this is one of the popular beliefs of the Nazi regime. So she says that she's already dead in a way, and the parts of her body are already used by her oppressors, and the oppressors could be anyone. Here she says her face is featureless, and her body and her skin is actually jewel linen, and these are all about the references or the popular beliefs of uh, whatever happened in Holocaust. And I had discussed this in my discussion in my video of Daddy, of the poem Daddy, that this is also the time when the discussion of Holocaust had come back to the public forums, because Adolf Eichmann's trial was being conducted, and people were revisiting the atrocities in Nazi Germany. And maybe she's affected by that, and she's bringing out all these, she's using these symbols again and again. And many critics are of the view that it's too much of an exaggeration for herself, for her to compare whatever she had gone through in her childhood or her own attempts at suicide, to compare that with the Holocaust atrocities. It would be too it would be too much of an exaggeration. But this is what she says. And then the poem continues: peel off my skin, O my enemy, do I terrify? Now she's angry, we can see, and she is, in a way, she's saying that she's rising from the dead, but she's not afraid. Peeling off the napkin is again an allusion to skin being peeled off, thus leading to an ugly exterior. And this is again a reference to the Nazi treatment of the Jews during the Holocaust. The enemy may be people who she has identified as adversaries. We see this in the later stanzas. It can also be her father, because in the later stanza we see that she addresses the oppressor as either a doctor, and she refers to him as Herr, which is a German word, and her father was German. And so these are all interpretations. You can interpret it in this way or in another way. She doesn't make it clear. What is clear in the poem is that she's really angry, and she's talking about how she is still wants to see herself as being invincible in a way. And so she's threatening in these particular lines, she's threatening her enemy by saying that even though she's injured with her skin peeling off or her body already being destroyed and repurposed, she is fearless and she's terrifying for her enemy. The nose, the eye pits, the full set of teeth, the sour breath will vanish in a day. Soon, soon the flesh, the grave cave 8 will be at home on me. Now she's talking about how she will be back to life. She's like walking dead. Her eyes are absent and hollow pits in the place. The other parts of her body may also be ugly and grotesque. And the breath at this point is foul smelling, but it will all vanish as she's going to come back to life. And she says, soon the flesh that the grave cave 8 will be back at home, it will be growing back. And she says that the flesh that has been peeled off will be back in its place, at home on me. That's what she means. Like Lazarus, she's rising from the dead again, so the skin will be back. And I, a smiling woman, now that when her skin will grow back, she would come back to her original state. And she says she is a smiling woman because that's how the world would ideally imagine her as. And I, a smiling woman, and she's using it as ironically. I'm only 30, and like a cat, I have 9 times to die. This is number 3. What a trash to annihilate each decade. With what a million filaments the peanut crunching crowds shove to see. Now, I'm reading these lines together because she uses this poetic device called enjambment, and I've discussed this in my earlier video of Daddy. Enjambment is when 2 lines of different stanzas are actually a single line and they connect together. So you're not supposed to read it stanza by stanza, but a few lines are actually connected between stanzas. and one of the stanzas ends with an incomplete line, and this is, she's using enjambment again and again in this poem. And she's also using rhymes and sometimes incomplete, improper rhymes also, but there's a lot of use of rhyme in this poem as well. Coming back to the poem, she says, "And I, a smiling woman, I'm only 30, and like a cat, I have 9 times to die." She uses a popular lore in a lot of her poems, like in Daddy, she goes back to the popular folklore about vampires, and here she's using the popular folklore that cats have 9 times to die, cats have 9 lives, and she says that I'm also like a cat, and I have many chances, I get many chances to meet death and then come back. And so she's only 30 years old, and she refers to this again in Daddy as well. She says that she's 30, and unfortunately 30 was the age when she had actually committed suicide in 1963. And she touches upon this the popular lore that a cat has 9 lives, to say that her attempt at suicide will be number 3. It will be her third attempt or her third encounter with death. And this is number 3. What a trash to annihilate each decade. What a million filaments the peanut crunching crowd shoved to see. So she says it's such a waste to kill her life, to to annihilate the life in all the filaments of all the pieces of her life, um, which are being destroyed through death again and again. And filament would basically mean either shreds of light or small pieces of light or life. And she says it's such a waste to see them getting annihilated or getting destroyed decade after decade. But she is also talking to a crowd, or talking about a crowd who she calls a peanut crunching crowd shoves to see. Now although she knows that she is dying and coming back again, she feels that whatever is happening in her life is a kind of a cheap entertainment for people who have an unhealthy interest in her and in her life. So she says that people who may have nothing to do with her, and which is a voyeuristic crowd who takes pleasure in her pain, a voyeuristic crowd pushes its way to look at her spectacle, which she calls a striptease. Later on, we see that she calls this her pain and the display of her pain as a striptease. And so she says that, so she is unhappy about the fact that people take pleasure in her pain, or that a crowd is watching her while she is in pain. But at the same time, she wants to use this image. She says that she knows it, and she wants to be unafraid about it. So she says that people have an unhealthy interest in her life, and it is almost as if they have especially come to see her striptease as a matter of cheap entertainment. And when she's coming back to life, she says that, see, these are my hands, these are my knees, etc. So she is making use of people's interest in her, and she wants to display herself as well. So it's a kind of critics have also called it a kind of a pornographic display of her body. You can interpret it in that way, or you can just look at it as how people want to watch her in pain. One of the other interpretations of this is also that when she had tried to commit suicide in 1953, there was a media frenzy surrounding it, and she was a young college student, a very promising young college student, and she had come home and she had tried to commit suicide, and she had disappeared for a while, and there was a lot of media frenzy around it, and perhaps that's what she is alluding to, but we cannot be sure. What can we be sure about is that she's unhappy, and she's talking about coming back to life. She says that, gentlemen and ladies, these are my hands, these are my knees, etc. She's projecting her own image as coming back to life. She says that she may be skin and bones, but she is the same person. She's the same person who had died. And she now she goes back to her own past. And as I said, there could be a there could be a biographical evidence, biographical reference to her own life. um, and so she says, the first time it happened, I was 10. It was an accident. And this may be the sewing accident that I had earlier talked about. The second time I meant to last it out and not come back at all. I rocked shut. So this is the 1953 incident that I just spoke about. The next time she tried to commit suicide, she meant to go ahead and be successful in her attempt, but she was saved. As a seashell, they had to call and pick the worms off me like sticky pearls. So she was called back and she was kind of healed and she was rescued, and she eventually was institutionalized as well. And there's an entire biographical record of what went on in that particular treatment. It clearly did not go well, and through her life she had fought mental illness as well. Dying is an art like everything else. I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I have a call. Now she says that dying is almost like an art, like everything else. She's good at the act of committing suicide. And Sylvia Plath, if you go back to her biography again, she was good at many things. She was a good cook, she was a good painter, she was a good poet, she had always been a very good student. So she said, like everything else, I commit suicide also very well, very successfully. and and she also says that committing suicide or trying to take her own life makes her feel real, makes her feel in control. So she feels real, and it feels real to her to have control of one's own life. It's easy enough to do it in a cell, it's easy enough to do it and stay put. It's the theatrical come back in broad day to the same place, the same face, the same brute, amused shout. So she says that, dying may be easy, it may itself not require much of an effort. It is easy to commit suicide, like she has tried. It is the coming back to life, the theatrical coming back to life after death that requires more courage and conviction, and also come back to the same brute. And here the word brute may refer to her father, and it could even refer to her husband. As I said, that she was writing at a time when her husband had abandoned her, and in a way he had also abandoned her children, because she was the sole caretaker of her children for a long time, until her own death. And so maybe the brute could refer to her husband as well. A miracle. So she says, and this is Enjambment. The last stanza ends with amused shout and a colon, and the next stanza says, a miracle that knocks me out. There is charge for the eyeing of my scars. There is charge for the hearing of my heart. It really goes. And so she says, now she's playing along. She says that if people want to watch me, if people have this undue interest in me and unhealthy interest in me, let them have let them watch, but they will have to pay. She says she wants to, so she's playing along with this peanut crunching crowd. She says she wants to take part in this striptease willingly and knowingly, and she says that she's taking the Holocaust metaphor ahead. And she says that there is a very large charge for a word or a touch or a bit of blood or the piece of my hair or my clothes. So, Herr Doctor, Herr Enemy. Now, hair is actually Sir in German. So she may be referring to somebody German in her life, which may be an allusion to her father, or it could be just another metaphor to Nazi Germany and how Jews were exploited or Jews were killed by the Nazi regime. And so she's projecting herself as a victim. So this could either mean that she's referring to the Holocaust doctors, or it could also be about a reference to the doctors who have kind of let her down in the way that her own mental illness was not treated very well, and through her life she was always really terrified of being institutionalized. So it could be any. So it could be simply her own distrust of the medical fraternity, that and this medical fraternity has brought her back to life and she wanted to actually die. So it could be either of these three interpretations. uh, and I am your opus, I am your valuable, the pure gold baby that melts to a shriek. I turn and burn. Do not think I underestimate your great concern. Ash, ash, you poke and stir, flesh, bone, there's nothing there. Again, we are uh, talking about Holocaust here. She says that I am your magnum opus, or I am your literary work, I am your project. I am pure gold that melts into a shriek. So she describes herself as gold which melts, and which is still, it's as pure and as shiny as, because it's gold. And she's saying underestimating the great concern could be again a reference to the doctor's concern, quote unquote concern. um, and she, again, this is a reference to her biography. Ash, ash is a reference to burning in the gas chamber, and but once she's burnt, it seems that there is nothing there, and she says you poke and stir flesh bone. There's nothing there. It's almost that she's burnt, right? But the ash again becomes a reference. She says, and again you go back, keep going and coming back to Holocaust references, the cake of soap, the wedding ring. All of these are references to all the rumors about whatever had happened to Jewish people in the Nazi regime. A cake of soap, a wedding ring, the gold filling are all things that Nazi regime would pick out from the dead bodies, and everything was all about how dead humans could be used. Even the gold filling of the teeth wouldn't be left waste. Again, she's being criticized for creating a false equivalence in a way, but we must understand that through these exaggerated accounts, she's only pointing out at what she had felt. And finally, she says towards the end that she says, "Out of ash, I rise, my red hair, and I eat men like air." Now she gives you an image of phoenix. The red hair are all images of phoenix. She says that she says that she is rising from her own ashes, from the dead, like Lazarus. She's out now to eat her oppressors, to go back and destroy the people who had caused so much pain to her, who had made her so frustrated. And now, so death gives her control, that she does not feel helpless or frustrated anymore, and she's rising like a phoenix. So the poem ends with her rise like a phoenix and her own comparison to phoenix. Thank you. This was the poem. And please write to me and talk to me about whatever comments that you have about my videos. Please like, share, and subscribe. We make videos every week and we cover poetry and authors in detail in English, and I also make other videos in Hindi. So if you have any comments, any demands, any requests, that there is a text that I need to cover, please let me know. I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.